The vibration in the control stick was the only thing telling Lieutenant Jack Miller that his hands were still attached to his body. At 28,000 feet, the temperature outside the canopy was 40 degrees below zero. Inside, it wasn't much better. The heater was struggling. Frost was creeping up the edges of the plexiglass like a living thing. He checked his oxygen mask. He checked his guns. He checked his fuel. Then he looked out to his left. Below him, stretching for miles, was a stream of B-17 flying fortresses. They looked like slow, lumbering silver giants. They were the target, and Jack was the shield. Suddenly, a flash of black smoke erupted in the middle of the bomber formation. No sound. Just a silent, violent blossom of fire. A wing sheared off a B-17. The fuselage began a death spiral into the clouds below. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. He scanned the sun. He looked for the glint of metal that shouldn't be there. The radio crackled. Bandits, 12 o'clock high, a whole swarm of them. Jack tightened his grip. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were deep over Germany, deeper than any fighter plane was supposed to go. But today was different. Today, the rules of war had changed. If you enjoy uncovering these pivotal moments where history turned on a dime, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us keep these stories alive. It was early 1944. The air war over Europe was becoming a slaughterhouse. The American bombers were trying to destroy the German war machine by day, but they were getting chewed up. The Luftwaffe was relentless. They knew the American escort fighters had to turn back at the German border because they ran out of fuel. The bombers were left alone to face the wolves. But on this cold morning, the wolves were about to meet a new kind of predator. Jack adjusted his throttle. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in front of him roared. It was a beast of an engine, encased in an aerodynamic shell that looked more like a race car than a weapon. The P-51 Mustang. He remembered what he wrote in his journal just 2 nights ago, sitting in a damp Nissen hut in England. The new bird is strange. It carries enough gas to fly to the moon and back. The crew chief says we can go all the way to Berlin. I told him he was crazy. He just patted the wing and told me to trust her. Trust. That was a hard commodity to come by at 30,000 feet. The sky ahead began to fill with specks. They grew larger. Focke-Wulf 190s, the pride of the German Air Force. They were diving on the bombers, expecting the American fighters to peel off and head for home. They expected an easy kill. Jack saw the lead German fighter line up on a straggling B-17. The radio barked again. Drop tanks now. Jack reached for the lever. He felt the thud as the external fuel tanks released from under his wings. Instantly, the Mustang felt lighter. It leaped forward. It wasn't a long-range hauler anymore. It was a knife. He slammed the throttle forward. The torque was immense. The plane shuddered and then surged. Red Flight, follow me down. We are engaging. Copy, Red Leader, on your wing. The dive was terrifying. The airspeed indicator spun past 400 miles per hour. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and blue. The scream of the engine drowned out his own breathing. Jack lined up his sights on the Focke-Wulf. The German pilot didn't see him. He was too focused on the bomber. Jack squeezed the trigger. 650 caliber machine guns erupted. The noise was like a jackhammer drilling directly into his skull. Tracers arced through the freezing air. They stitched a line across the German's wing. Debris flew. Smoke poured out. The German pilot panicked. He banked hard right, pulling immense G-forces. In any other plane, Jack would have had to break off. The P-47 was too heavy to follow that turn. The Spitfire didn't have the range to be here. But the Mustang was different. Jack pulled back on the stick. The blood drained from his head. His vision grayed at the edges. The G-suit squeezed his legs, trying to keep him conscious. The Mustang bit into the air. It carved the turn effortlessly. He was still on the German's tail. "I can't shake him," the German pilot must have been thinking. Jack wrote about this feeling later. "It felt like the plane was reading my mind. You didn't fly the Mustang. You wore it. It became an extension of your will. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the hunter." The German pilot tried to dive. Jack followed. The Merlin engine didn't choke. It didn't stutter. It sang. They plummeted toward the cloud deck. Jack checked his altimeter. 15,000 feet. 10,000. He fired again. A short, controlled burst. The canopy of the Focke-Wulf shattered. The plane rolled over, trailing black oil, and disappeared into the clouds. "Splash one," Jack whispered. But there was no time to celebrate. The sky was a chaotic swirl of contrails. It looked like a bowl of spaghetti thrown against a blue wall. To his right, he saw a Mustang trailing smoke. "Red 2, I'm hit. Engine temp is spiking. Break off, Jimmy. Head for the deck. Try to make the channel." "I can't. I've got 2 on my tail." Jack hauled the stick back. The Mustang groaned under the stress. He climbed, trading speed for altitude. He saw his wingman, Jimmy, diving desperately with 2 Messerschmitt 109s glued to his 6. Jack was too far away. He checked his ammo counters. He had enough for maybe 10 seconds of firing. He pushed the nose down again. He needed speed. He needed to close the gap. The Mustang accelerated. It was the fastest prop plane in the sky, and right now, Jack needed every ounce of that speed. The lead Messerschmitt opened fire on Jimmy. Pieces of Jimmy's tail rudder flew off. "I'm losing control. Jack!" "Hang on, Jimmy. I'm coming." Jack didn't fire. He waited. He was closing in fast. Too fast. He was going to overshoot. He chopped the throttle. He threw the flaps. The Mustang shuddered as it slowed violently. The German pilot saw him in the rearview mirror. He pulled up sharply, trying to force Jack to fly past him. It was a classic trap. But Jack didn't fly past. He pulled the nose up into a vertical climb. The Mustang hung in the air on its propeller, defying gravity. The energy retention was incredible. As the German stalled at the top of his climb, trying to turn over, Jack was still climbing. He was still in control. He kicked the rudder pedal. The Mustang pivoted on a dime. Now he was looking down at the German cockpit. He pressed the trigger. The guns roared. The Messerschmitt exploded into a fireball. Jack banked hard to avoid the debris. He looked for the second German. Gone. He had seen what the Mustang could do, and he had run. Jack pulled up alongside Jimmy's crippled plane. "You okay over there?" "My rudder is shot to hell, Jack, but the engine is running. Form up on me. We're going home. Slow and steady." The flight back was agonizing. The adrenaline wore off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Jack's arms ached from wrestling the stick. His eyes burned from the constant scanning of the horizon. He looked at his fuel gauge. It was low but not empty. That was the miracle of the Mustang. They had fought a war over Berlin and still had enough gas to get back to England. Below them, the English Channel appeared. A strip of gray water that meant safety. Jack touched down on the tarmac 2 hours later. The wheels chirped against the concrete. He taxied to his revetment and killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. The prop spun to a halt. He sat there for a moment, just breathing. He patted the side of the cockpit. The metal was still warm. His crew chief jumped onto the wing. "How was it, Lieutenant? Did she behave?" Jack pulled off his helmet. He looked at the man. "She didn't just behave, Chief. She changed everything." That night, Jack sat by the stove in the barracks. The room was quiet. Empty bunks reminded them of the men who hadn't come back. But fewer bunks were empty tonight than last month. He opened his diary. His hand shook slightly as he wrote. We saw them today. The bombers. They waved their wings at us. They know. They know they aren't alone anymore. We can go where they go. We can kill the things that hunt them. The Germans are afraid. I saw it in the way they flew. They know the sky doesn't belong to them anymore. According to official U.S. Army Air Force reports, the introduction of the P-51 Mustang with drop tanks changed the statistical probability of a bomber crew surviving their tour of duty from less than 25% to over 70% in a matter of months. Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe, famously said that when he saw American fighters over Berlin, he knew the war was lost. It wasn't the bombs that defeated the Luftwaffe. It was the attrition. The Mustangs forced the German pilots to fight, and they shot them down. They destroyed the experienced pilot corps of Germany. Historians confirm that the P-51 claimed nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft in the air, more than any other Allied fighter. It broke the back of the Luftwaffe. The war would drag on for another year. There would be more battles, more empty bunks, more letters home that would never be delivered. But the tide had turned. The bomber crews had a name for the Mustangs. They called them their little friends. When Jack Miller closed his eyes that night, he didn't hear the screaming of engines or the rattle of machine guns. He heard the radio chatter of the bomber crews. Thank you, little friends. Good to see you. War creates heroes. It creates legends. And sometimes, rare times, it creates a machine that is more than just metal and rivets. The Mustang was one of them. It was the plane that won the war.